The noodles were going cold. That was the only thing Thyron Kale noticed when the train station doors blew open and the wind cut through his coat like it had something to prove. He didn't look up. He learned a long time ago that looking up cost more than it was worth. The Halverson Central Station was supposed to be abandoned. The city had shut it down 3 years back after a structural report came out. But the homeless knew the truth. The heaters on the east platform still ran. Maintenance still came twice a week. Nobody from the city came to actually remove anyone. So the station became what a lot of things in Halverson became. A secret everyone kept because it was convenient. Thyron had his spot. Third bench from the far wall, near the yellow pillar where the light never worked. He had his cup of noodles from the vending machine on level 2, 60 cents, which had taken him 4 days to collect. And he had his coat, which used to belong to someone else and smelled like it. That was his world. That was enough. He broke the plastic fork in half by accident and stared at it for a second. Then he used what was left. The doors opened again. This time the sound was different. Not wind. Footsteps. Multiple. Measured. The kind of footsteps that knew exactly where they were going and didn't apologize for the noise. Thyron still didn't look up, but his hands slowed. The footsteps stopped. Not near the entrance. Not near the platform edge. Near him. This bench taken? The voice was low. Calm. The kind of calm that didn't come from peace. It came from years of not needing to raise it. Thyron looked up for the first time. The man standing in front of him was tall in a way that felt architectural. Dark coat. No logos. No watch. Nothing that screamed wealth, but everything that radiated it. His face was still. Not cold, still. Like someone who had learned to manage whatever moved underneath. Behind him, 2 other men stood at a distance that said bodyguard without saying a word. Hi viewers. Have you ever been in a moment where a complete stranger looked at you like they already knew something about your life that you didn't? Thyron said nothing. The man didn't wait for an answer. He sat down on the far end of the bench. Not close. Not distant. Just present. They sat in silence for a full minute. Then the man spoke again, eyes still forward. Your cup is tipping. Thyron grabbed the noodles before they fell. He hadn't noticed. He set them straight and said nothing. The man looked at him then. Just once. Quick. Direct. The kind of look that doesn't explain itself. Valric, he said. Thyron didn't answer with his own name. He hadn't given it freely in 2 years. Valric reached into his coat. Slow, deliberate, no sudden moves, and pulled out a plain paper bag. He set it on the bench between them without ceremony and stood. Cold out tonight, he said. Then he left. His footsteps moved toward the far exit. The 2 men followed without a word. The station doors opened and shut. Gone. Thyron stared at the paper bag for a long time. He didn't touch it, because in his experience, things left for him always came with a price he found out about too late. But the smell got him. Actual food. Hot food. The kind of hot that meant someone had made it recently, maybe 20 minutes ago, from somewhere that had a kitchen. He opened the bag. Inside was a container of jerk chicken and rice, a bottle of water, and a folded piece of white paper. He picked up the paper last. It was a single line written by hand. You were at the Marin District meeting 3 years ago. I know what you saw. Thyron's hands went completely still. Because nobody was supposed to know he was at that meeting. Nobody. The container of food sat open in his lap, steam rising in the cold air. And somewhere outside, a black car pulled away from the station into the dark. And Thyron Kale sat alone on a bench in an abandoned train station, holding a piece of paper that meant someone had found him. After 2 years of making sure no one could. By morning the paper was gone. Thyron had burned it in the drain on the north platform, watched the flame take it, waited until there was nothing but gray ash. Then he moved his sleeping spot 2 platforms over. Old habit. Whenever something changed, he changed with it. But changing locations didn't change the words. You were at the Marin District meeting 3 years ago. I know what you saw. He knew exactly what he saw. That was the problem. The Marin District meeting had not been covered by a single news outlet. Not even the ones that covered everything. It had lasted 40 minutes in a closed conference room on the 4th floor of the old Halverson Commerce Building, and when it ended, 2 people who had been in that room never showed up anywhere again. Thyron had been the 3rd person in that room. The one nobody had accounted for. The one nobody was supposed to remember. He spent the morning in the station bathroom, running cold water over his face and trying to think clearly. The problem with being invisible for 2 years was that it worked until it didn't. And when it stopped working, it stopped fast. He needed to move. Not across town. Out of the city. He had thought about it before. Halverson wasn't a place people left easily. It had money at the top and pressure at the bottom and a whole system in between that kept both in place. But he had survived this long. He could plan. He came back to his bench to get the one bag he owned. It was gone. Not the bag. The bench area. Cleared. His bag sat neatly on the ground beside the yellow pillar, and sitting on the bench was a woman in a sharp gray coat, drinking coffee from a tall cup, looking at him like she had been waiting. Thyron stopped walking. She was maybe 40, hair pulled back, eyes that moved the way people's eyes moved when they were trained to catalog everything they saw. She set her cup down on the bench beside her. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not here to talk to you," she said. "That would waste both our time." "I don't have time," Thyron said. "You have nothing but time right now." She wasn't being cruel, just precise. "My name is Delara Osei. I work independent of any PAC authority in this city, which I understand matters to you." Thyron didn't move closer. He didn't leave either. Delara reached into her coat and set a photograph on the bench. Face up. She didn't push it toward him. He could see it from where he stood. It was a picture of the Halverson Commerce Building. 3rd floor window. A figure standing just behind the glass, partially visible. Him. 3 years ago. "Whoever took that has had it for 3 years, Delara said. "They didn't use it, which means they've been waiting for the right moment. Or the right leverage." "Who sent you?" "Nobody sent me." She picked up her coffee again. "I came because last night Valric Zirith sat on this bench with you. And if Valric is making contact, then something is moving in this city that I want to understand before it lands on top of everyone who can't get out of the way." That word. Zirith. Thyron had known the name before last night. Everyone in Halverson knew it. The Triplets. The Alpha bloodline that had left the city years ago and apparently returned without announcement. He had not made the connection the night before. The man had given only one name. Valric. Now the connection was made. And it changed the weight of everything. "I'm not talking to you," Thyron said. "Not yet," Delara agreed. She stood, picked up her bag, and straightened her coat. She left a small white card on the bench. No name on it. Just a number. "When the next person approaches you," she said, "and there will be a next person, ask yourself who benefits from you staying quiet. It hasn't been you." She walked out. Thyron stood at the edge of his cleared bench and looked at the card. He left it there. He picked up his bag. He counted what he had. He walked to the east platform and found the corner behind the old schedule board where the heat came up strongest from the vent below. He sat down and pulled his knees up and tried to think about everything except what he knew. The thing about the Marin District meeting was that he had not gone there willingly. He had been brought there. And the people who brought him had told him, in very clear terms, that if he ever spoke about what he saw, they would make sure no one would believe a word from him. They had done more than that. They had made sure he had no life to speak from. But if Valric Zirith knew he had been there, if someone with the Zirith name was sitting in abandoned train stations at night handing him food and handwritten notes, then the calculation had changed. Someone powerful wanted him to talk. And someone else, powerful in a different way, wanted him to stay buried. Thyron pulled his coat tighter and watched the steam from the heating vent curl up toward the ceiling in the cold station air. By that afternoon, he would find out which side had more to lose. Because 3 streets away, in a building Thyron had no way of knowing about, a meeting was already happening. and his name was on the table. The Zerith building had 40 floors. Valric's office was on the 39th, not the top. That had been his choice years ago. The 40th was where their father had worked. None of the three brothers used it. He stood at the window and watched the city move below. Morning traffic, people going somewhere, normal problems. Behind him, his brother Cashin was already annoyed. You sat with him on a bench. I sat near him, in an abandoned train station. The heaters still work. Valric. Cashin's voice shifted. He wasn't performing patience, he had actually run out of it. He was the middle triplet, which in the Zerith family meant he had spent 30 years being the one who translated between his two brothers. It had made him sharp in ways that weren't always comfortable. People saw you. The footage has been shared through at least 4 private networks. Pack elders have already called this morning. I know. Then explain to me what you were doing. Valric turned from the window. The third brother, Evander, was sitting in the chair by the door, reading something on his phone. He had not spoken yet. He was the youngest by 4 minutes, and he had learned early that waiting was often more productive than talking. His name is Thyron Kale, Valric said. He was present at the Marin district meeting 3 years ago. That landed. Cashin went still. Evander looked up from his phone. The Marin district meeting was not something they discussed openly. Not even between the three of them. It was the event that had started the sequence. The night that multiple pack leaders had gathered in one room to formalize an agreement that should have never been formalized. An agreement that reorganized territory, silenced specific families, and buried certain records in exchange for controlled peace. 2 people who attended that meeting had disappeared. The official story was relocation. Voluntary. Quiet. Nobody had pushed back on the official story because nobody wanted to be the one who asked the question out loud. He was there, Cashin said carefully. As what? I don't know yet. But whoever brought him there wanted a witness they could disappear. Someone with no standing. No pack. No support system. Valric looked at both of them. They chose well. He's been invisible for 2 years. Living in that station. No address. No records. They erased him, Evander said. Not a question. They tried to. Cashin crossed the room. And now you've drawn attention to him. Your face, his face on private networks all over the city. The elders aren't just annoyed, they're asking questions. Some of them were in that room, Valric. Some of them signed what got signed. I know exactly who was in that room, Valric said quietly. That was the part Cashin didn't push back on. Because he knew what it meant. Their father had been in that room too. Not signing, watching. And 3 weeks later their father had died from what the official records called a cardiac event. He was 52 years old. He had never had a single heart problem in his life. None of them had spoken that truth out loud either. For 3 years they had been abroad, managing business, building distance. And then something had pulled Valric back first. Then the others followed. Not a plan, a feeling. The kind that came when something unfinished was close to breaking open on its own. So what is the plan? Evander asked. Get to him before they do. They already know you made contact. They know I sat near a homeless man in a train station, Valric said. They don't know what I left him. They don't know what he knows. And right now, that gap is the only thing keeping him alive. Cashin walked to the window and stood where Valric had been standing. He looked down at the city. Then, without turning around, he said what all 3 of them were thinking. If he talks, and if what he says holds up, it doesn't just expose the Marin agreement. It exposes everyone who enforced the silence afterward. That's half the pack authority in this city. Yes, Valric said. And us? The Zerith name is attached to this whether we want it to be or not. Our father was there. Our father didn't sign. That distinction may not survive the headlines. The room sat quiet for a moment. Then Evander stood, put his phone in his pocket, and moved toward the door. I'll reach out to our contact in the records office. If they moved his files, There's a copy somewhere. He paused with his hand on the door. And Valric, next time you decide to start a city-wide incident, let us know beforehand. He left. Cashin stayed by the window. He trusted you enough to open the bag, he said eventually. He was hungry. That's not why. Cashin finally turned around. You knew it wasn't why. People who've been running that long don't open bags from strangers because they're hungry. They open them because they've decided something changed. He looked at his brother directly. What does he know, Valric? All of it. Not the version where you managed information. Valric was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, he knows the names. All of them. Everyone in that room. Cashin closed his eyes briefly. And he can prove it? He has something. I don't know what yet. But whoever erased him believed he had something worth erasing him for. Down on the 39th floor of a building that the city watched carefully, two brothers stood in a room full of weight. And on the east platform of an abandoned train station 12 blocks away, a young man with cold hands and a single bag was about to make the decision that would change everything. For all of them, Thyron made it 4 blocks before they found him. He had planned to go further. He had a loose idea. Get to the Gray Line bus depot on Harmon Street, pay cash, get out of the city before anyone organized. He wasn't carrying much. The bag was light. He had done this kind of movement before or something like it. But the car was already there. Not a threat car. Not black windows and obvious weight. This was a regular gray sedan, parked on the curb with the engine running, and behind the wheel was a man who looked like he had been waiting for a while without minding. The window came down. The driver was young, maybe 25, clean-cut. He looked at Thyron the way someone looks at a person they've been briefed about, recognizing without knowing personally. Mr. Kale. That name. In public. Out loud. Thyron's body went tight. You have the wrong person, he said and kept walking. There's a second car on Durrell Avenue, the young man said. No urgency. Just information. And a third one at the Harmon Depot. They got there about 40 minutes before you started moving. Thyron stopped. He didn't turn around. 3 cars. 40 minutes ahead of him. That meant they had known he was leaving before he decided to leave. Which meant they had been watching the station for longer than last night. Which meant the woman this morning, Delara, had not been the first person to observe him. She had been the first to make contact. He turned around slowly. Who sent you? He asked. Valric Zirith. A beat. Get in or don't, the young man said. But if you walk away, you're walking into one of the other 2 cars and those ones don't work for Zirith. That matters. Thyron stood on the sidewalk for 8 seconds. He counted them. 8 full seconds of weighing what little he had against what all of this could mean. Then he got in. The car pulled into traffic without rushing. The driver didn't speak. Thyron watched the streets move past the window and thought about the last time he had been in a car. It had been longer than he wanted to calculate. They stopped in front of a building on the west side. Not the Zirith Tower, something smaller. A converted warehouse, the kind that had been cleaned up and refinished without trying too hard to hide what it used to be. The driver got out. He led Thyron to a side entrance, through a hallway, into a room that had a table, for chairs, a large window with the blinds half open, and Valric Zirith. He was standing. Not sitting like last night. Standing, with his coat off, in a black sweater, arms crossed. The driver left. The door didn't lock. Thyron stood just inside the threshold. You cleared out fast, Valric said. Good instinct. Sit down. I'll stand. Valric didn't push it. He moved to the table and sat down himself, which shifted the dynamic. He was now lower than Thyron, which felt intentional. I want to tell you what I know first, Valric said, before I ask you anything. I think you've had enough people take from you without offering anything back. Thyron said nothing. Your name was Thyron Kale, son of Marcina Kale, who worked as a document analyst for the Halverson Planning Commission. You were assigned as her assistant at 21, which meant you had building access, filing clearance, and occasionally attended closed meetings as a record keeper. He paused. The Marin District meeting was one of those meetings. You were there as a record keeper. Technically, officially, your name should appear in the meeting logs. It doesn't. No, they pulled it. Along with your credentials, your employment records, your housing registration, and your secondary school transcripts. He looked at Thyron directly. Someone with significant access inside city administration deleted you. Not just fired you. Erased you. The room felt smaller than it was. Thyron had known all of this. He had lived all of this. But hearing it spoken out loud, cataloged and confirmed by someone else, it did something he hadn't expected. It made it real in a way that the daily reality of surviving had kept him from fully feeling. My mother, Thyron said quietly, relocated to a care facility in the Northern District 18 months ago. She's physically safe. Valric held eye contact. I checked yesterday, before I came to find you. That was the moment. Not the food. Not the note. The fact that he had checked on Marcina Kale before doing anything else told Thyron something about the kind of man sitting across the table. It didn't mean Valric was safe. Powerful people could be considerate and still be dangerous. But it told him something. What do you want from me? Thyron asked. I want to know what you saw in that room. He said it plain. Not what you can prove yet. What you saw. What you remember. Thyron moved to the table. He pulled out a chair. He sat down. And for the first time in 2 years, he opened his mouth to tell the truth. But before he could say a single word, Valric's phone lit up on the table between them. Valric looked at the screen. Something shifted in his face. Not fear. Not surprise. Controlled alarm. We have to move, he said. What happened? The building on Marin Street. He was already standing. Someone just burned it down. The building on Marin Street was the Halverson Commerce Building. The one with the 4th floor conference room. The one that was the only physical location connected to that meeting. Thyron was on his feet before he thought about it. And as they moved out of the room, he realized that whoever had been hiding this for 3 years wasn't hiding anymore. They were cleaning up, and he was still on the list. The smoke was visible from 6 blocks out. Not the thin gray kind, the thick black kind. The kind that said the fire had been fed something, had been helped along. The kind that didn't look like an accident from any angle. Valric drove. Thyron sat in the passenger seat, which felt strange. Being in the front of something moving forward instead of behind it. His hands were flat on his thighs. He was watching the sky get darker ahead of them. Who knew about the building? He asked. Everyone who was in that room. Then this is one of them. Yes. Which one? That's the question. Valric kept his eyes on the road. The building was scheduled for city review next month. There's a development claim on the land. 3 different parties filed overlapping bids. If I had to guess, burning it down has 2 purposes. Destroy whatever physical records were left inside, and create enough legal chaos around the property that no one can investigate the site cleanly. Thyron thought about that. There were no records left inside, he said. Valric glanced at him. I went back 2 years ago, Thyron said. Before they finished erasing me. I still had my key card. The filing room on the 4th floor had been cleared. Completely emptied. Whatever was there, they had already moved it or destroyed it. Then the fire is for something else. It's a message. Valric pulled the car to a stop 3 blocks from the building. There were already emergency vehicles ahead. The street was blocked. People on the sidewalks were watching with their phones up, filming the smoke the way people filmed everything now. He turned the engine off. For a moment they just sat there. The footage from the train station is already being framed, Valric said. I've been watching what's circulating. The version going around the pack networks now says I was meeting with an informant. That I've been working with someone outside the system to build a case against the elders. Is that true? A pause. Not yet, Valric said. Thyron almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was the most honest thing anyone had said to him in 2 years. My brother Evander has a contact in the city records office, Valric continued. If your files were pulled digitally, there's a log. Deletion requests leave traces if you know where to look. We may be able to reconstruct your employment history, your assignment to that meeting, your presence in the room, all of it. That takes time. It takes days. Maybe a week. A week is a long time when someone is burning buildings. It is. Valric turned to face him fully. Which is why I need to know what you have. Not what you remember. What you actually have. Physical. Digital. Stored somewhere. He held his gaze steady. Because whoever is doing this believes you still have something. They wouldn't be moving this fast if they thought you were just a homeless man with a 2-year-old memory. Thyron looked at the smoke rising above the buildings ahead. He had kept this particular secret longer than any other. Longer than his own name. At the Marin district meeting, he said slowly, the record keeper's job was to take notes on a provided tablet. Standard city issue. At the end of the meeting, the tablet was supposed to be surrendered. Logged back in. Wiped. He stopped. But, Valric said, they were rushed at the end. Something happened in the room, an argument. 2 of the men got loud with each other. The woman who was collecting the equipment was distracted. She took my bag instead of the tablet case. I realized it afterward. He looked at Valric. I kept the tablet. I still have it. The words settled. Valric didn't react immediately. He absorbed it, measured it. Where? Not here. Not in the city. A pause. My mother's facility. Northern District. I gave it to her before they moved her. She didn't know what it was. I told her it was an old work device I wanted stored safely. He stopped again. If they've been watching her. I told you she was safe, Valric said. I have someone at the facility. They've been there since yesterday. Thyron stared at him. You moved fast. I've been building toward this for a year, Valric said quietly. I just didn't have the centerpiece. The smoke was thicker now. On the sidewalk nearby, a group of people had gathered. One of them, a man in a long coat, older, silver at his temples, turned and looked in the direction of their parked car. His eyes passed over the windshield and stopped. He looked directly at Valric. Valric looked back. Neither of them moved. The man in the long coat turned away slowly and walked toward a black car idling on the next block. Who is that? Thyron asked. Valric's jaw tightened for just a second. Elder Prosper Whitfield, he said. He was in the room at Marin. He was one of the 2 men who got into the argument at the end of the meeting. Thyron went very still, because he remembered that argument. He remembered it word for word. And now he understood what the tablet contained that was worth burning a building over. It wasn't just names. It was a recording. The tablet had been running a passive audio capture the entire meeting, standard function on city-issue devices, designed for transcription purposes. He hadn't known it was recording until he got home and opened the files. He had listened to 23 minutes of audio, and then he had understood why 2 people from that room had never been seen again. Valric started the car. We need to get to that facility, he said, before Whitfield makes a call. They pulled away from the curb, and somewhere behind them, the Commerce building burned, and the smoke rose over Halverson like a signal. But the signal was going the wrong direction, because the evidence they were trying to destroy had never been in that building. It had been sitting in a drawer in a care facility in the north of the city for 2 years, waiting. And now 2 people who both needed the truth for very different reasons were driving toward it together. The question was whether they would get there first, and who else already knew where to look. The car hit a red light and Valric didn't wait for it to change. He cut left through a side street, then another, moving through Halverson's west grid like he had mapped it in his sleep. Maybe he had. Thyron watched the city blur past the window and said nothing. His mind was doing the math that mattered. Whitfield had seen them. That meant Whitfield knew Thyron was with Valric. Which meant whoever Whitfield called in the next 10 minutes would know the same. The facility was 40 minutes north. If someone got there first with the right credentials, the right story, a concerned family member, a medical inquiry, a city welfare check, the tablet would be gone before they arrived. How fast can they move? Thyron asked. Faster than you want to know. Then we need someone inside the facility right now. Not when we get there. Valric already had his phone up. He spoke without looking at the screen. Evander, Northgate Care, room 14. Don't ask for the tablet. Just make sure no one goes in or out of that room until we arrive. A pause. Yes, now. He put the phone down. Thyron noticed the speed of that. No explanation. No back and forth. Evander had heard the word tablet and moved. That meant the brothers had already talked about it, already understood what it could mean, before Thyron had even confirmed it existed. You assumed I had something, Thyron said. I hoped. That's not the same thing. No, Valric said. It's not. They crossed into the northern corridor of the city. The buildings changed, shorter here, more space between them, older money that didn't need to announce itself with height. The care facility was on a quiet street backed by a line of oak trees that had been there longer than anything around them. Valric pulled up to the gate. A man in a dark jacket was already at the entrance. Not facility staff. Evander's contact, he was maybe 30, built like someone who took up more space than he needed, and he opened the gate without asking for identification. They parked. They moved inside. The front desk attendant started to speak and then looked at the man in the dark jacket standing behind the two visitors and decided not to. Thyron had never been here before. He had arranged everything through a third party when they moved his mother. He had not allowed himself to visit. Visiting created a trail. He knew that. But standing in the hallway now, smelling the antiseptic and the faint warmth of something cooking somewhere deep in the building, it hit him in a way he was not prepared for. Room 14. The door was closed. The man in the dark jacket, Rowan, Thyron learned in the next 30 seconds, stopped outside it. Anyone come to this room today? Valric asked. 2 visitors this morning, both cleared by the facility. One was a regular volunteer, one listed as a medical student on rotation. He paused. The medical student asked to see the patient's personal storage drawer. The nurse said no. Standard protocol. That was close. Too close. Thyron pushed the door open. The room was small and warm. A window with thin curtains. A bed, adjusted upright. And in it, a woman with gray threading through her hair and eyes that were slow to focus but sharp once they did. Marcina Kale looked at her son. She didn't say his name out loud. She had learned, in the careful way people learn things they weren't taught directly, that some things were safer kept quiet. She just looked at him. And after 2 years of not looking back, Thyron crossed the room and stood at the edge of her bed and let her see his face. Baby, she said. Just that. He nodded once. I need the device I asked you to keep, he said quietly. I'm sorry to ask this way. She didn't hesitate. She pointed to the lower drawer of the bedside table. He opened it. Under a folded prayer cloth and a photograph he recognized from their old apartment, there was a flat gray case. He opened it. The tablet was there. Old city issue. Still in the same condition. He turned it over in his hands. Behind him, Valric stood in the doorway and said nothing. Marcina looked past Thyron at the man there. You brought him here? She said. He came on his own, Valric said. I just drove. She studied Valric for a long moment. The kind of look a mother gives when she is deciding whether to trust something that could hurt her child. Then she said, his father used to say that the truth was the most expensive thing a man could carry. Valric held her gaze. He was right. She looked back at Thyron. Then make sure it costs the right people. Thyron closed the case. And outside, in the facility parking lot, a black car had just pulled through the gate. 3 minutes, maybe less. 3 minutes was not enough. Not if the people in that car had paperwork. Official paperwork moved faster than anything else in Halverson because it made every person in its path stop asking questions and start following instructions. Valric saw the car from the window in the hallway. Back exit, he said. Rowan moved them toward the east wing without being asked. He had been in this building before. He knew the layout. That was not an accident. They moved fast. Not running, moving. Running in care facilities made noise and caused attention. Walking with purpose looked like staff. My mother, Thyron started. She stays, Valric said quietly. They have no grounds to move her. She's a patient. If they approach her, the facility has an obligation to log it. That log becomes evidence. Unless they're past caring about evidence. They're not. If they were past evidence, the building would have burned with someone in it, not empty. Cold calculation, but it held. They came out on the east side, facing the oak trees and a service road running parallel to the main street. Rowan had a second car there. Plain, different plates. They got in. Rowan pulled onto the service road without rushing. Behind them, through the rear window, Thyron watched two men in dark coats enter the facility's front entrance. One was carrying a folder. Official. Purposeful. Who are they? Thyron asked. City legal. Someone filed an emergency records request. For your mother. Valric had his phone in his hand again. They can't force access to a patient without a court order. That takes hours minimum. They're here to apply pressure, to see if she'll voluntarily hand over anything. She doesn't know what's on the tablet. They don't know that. Rowan drove them south then east, looping away from the facility, adding distance between the black car and the gray case sitting in Thyron's lap. The tablet. 51 minutes of audio from a closed meeting that officially never happened. Recorded on a device that was supposed to be wiped. Thyron had listened to 23 minutes 3 years ago, sitting in the kitchen of an apartment he no longer had. He had stopped at the 23-minute mark because the room on the recording had gotten loud in a way that felt physical, chairs scraping, something hitting a table. He had never known there was 28 more minutes. We need a device to play it, he said. Evander has what we need at the secondary office. Valric looked at him. Are you ready to hear it again? Thyron looked out the window. The city was moving past. Normal. A Tuesday. People going somewhere with regular problems. I've been ready for 2 years, he said. I just didn't have anyone to hand it to. Rowan pulled onto a wide avenue. Valric's phone buzzed. He read the message. Something in his face tightened, not dramatically. Just around the jaw. What? Thyron said. Delara Osei is already at the secondary office. Thyron went very still. You know her, Valric said. She came to the station this morning. Said she was independent. Said she wanted to understand what was moving before it landed on people who couldn't get out of the way. She's been building a case of her own for 18 months. She lost a client connected to the Marin meeting. Someone she was representing who disappeared 6 months after and got listed as voluntary relocation. Same language they used for everyone else. Valric paused. The difference between her and us is that she works alone. No family name. No PAC authority. Which means if she presents evidence, it can't be dismissed as Zirith politics. Thyron understood immediately. Delara Osei was the more dangerous weapon, and she was already waiting. The secondary office was a law firm on the 3rd floor of a building on Cartwright Street. The kind of building with a lot of quiet coming and going and no reason to draw attention. Evander was at the entrance. He looked at Thyron the way Cashin had looked at him. Briefed, calibrated, not unfriendly. The tablet works? Evander asked. Don't know yet, Thyron said. Then we find out now. They went up. Delara was standing by the window, arms crossed, her coffee cold on the table beside her. She looked at Thyron when he walked in. You took the card, she said. I didn't, he said. I know. I just wanted to see your face when I said it. She turned to Valric. Whitfield made 3 calls in the last 40 minutes. 1 to City Legal. 1 to a man named Bryce Calloway who controls 2 of the 7 elder seats. 1 to a number routing through a private exchange we haven't traced. He's afraid, Evander said. Coordinating comes after, Delara agreed. This was reflex. Thyron set the gray case on the table. Everyone in the room looked at it. He opened it. Set the tablet flat. It needed a specific charge cable, Evander had one, and they plugged it in and waited for the screen. Came on. Dim, slow, but on. In a folder marked with a date from 3 years ago, there was one audio file. 51 minutes long. Thyron stared at the number. 23 minutes was all he had ever heard. There was 28 more minutes of a recording from a room where someone had decided his father needed to disappear. He hadn't known. Until right now. Nobody pressed play immediately. 5 people in a room with a recording that could undo half the power structure of Halverson, and for 10 full seconds nobody moved. Then Delara reached across the table and pressed play herself. The audio was clear. Surprisingly clear for a 3-year-old device. Background hiss. The kind that came from a room with no soft surfaces, but the voices cut through it without effort. Thyron recognized the room from the sound before any voice spoke. The slight echo off the glass wall on the east side. The ventilation hum. The way someone's chair scraped once at the beginning and then went quiet. The first voice was Elder Calloway. And the first thing Calloway said, before any formal discussion, before any agenda, was a name. The name of a man Thyron had not known 3 years ago. He knew it now. Evander made a sound. Barely anything. Just a breath that came out sharp. He knew the name too. Valric didn't react. Because Valric had already known. He had known who the 3rd principal in that room was and had not told his brothers. That itself said something about how carefully Valric had been holding all of this. What he knew when he knew it, what he was building toward. 12 minutes in, the tone on the recording shifted. Less formal. The kind of shift that happens when everyone in a room believes they are safe and unrecorded. People drop the performance. They talk the way they actually think. They talked about the families. Specifically, 3 families whose PAC land claims conflicted with a development corridor that had been quietly approved 6 months earlier. The families had filed legal challenges. The challenges had standing. 2 of them had attorneys who were, according to the voices on the recording, creating a situation that required a permanent resolution. That phrase. Pause on that. Permanent resolution. Delara stopped the playback. She looked at Valric. That attorney, she said. The one they referenced. That was my client. Her voice was completely flat. Not upset, past upset. The kind of flat that comes from 18 months of knowing something was true and not being able to prove it. He disappeared 5 weeks after this meeting. Nobody spoke. She pressed play. At the 23-minute mark, where Thyron had stopped 3 years ago, the conversation broke apart. 2 voices got loud. One was Whitfield. He had objected to something. Not the plan itself. The scope of it. He had drawn a line, and the other voice told him plainly that lines were for people who could afford to draw them. Then the argument went physical. Chairs. Something hitting a table. Then it continued. And at 27 minutes and 40 seconds, the voice that had been running the meeting, the one that had gone unnamed for the first 23 minutes, spoke to the room directly. He laid it out. Clean. Efficient. No hesitation. Which families would lose their claims. How the legal challenges would be neutralized. Who would handle the specific individuals who presented the greatest ongoing risk. Then, at 31 minutes, he said a name. The room around the tablet went silent. Evander stood up from his chair. Cashin, who had arrived quietly during the playback, was at the back wall. His expression had moved past anger into somewhere colder. Valric had gone completely still. The name on the recording was their father's. Not as a participant, as a target. The voice said, without hesitation, That Aldrich Zirith was the one individual whose continued inquiry into the Marin Development Corridor posed the greatest threat to the arrangement. That his situation would need to be addressed within 90 days. 90 days. Their father had died 63 days after this meeting. The recording ran another 20 minutes after that. Details. Logistics. Names of city officials who had been paid. Land parcels. The development company. The legal mechanisms used to clear the family claims. When it ended, the room stayed quiet for a long time. Then Delara spoke. That voice. The one running the meeting. His name is Harlan Seve. He is currently serving as Deputy Director of City Infrastructure. She looked around the room. He's also on the short list for the director position, which comes with full appointment authority over PAC territory assessments citywide. The appointment, Evander said, is scheduled for review at the end of the month. There it was. The reason for the urgency. The fire. The cars at the care facility. The 3 calls from Whitfield. Harlan Seve was days away from a position that would make him untouchable. And there was a recording of him ordering the death of a man. How do we move this? Cashin said. First words since he arrived. Delara looked at Thyron. He was in the room, she said. He can verify the recording matches what he witnessed. Without him, this is audio of unknown origin. With him, it's testimony. Everyone looked at Thyron. This was the part he had avoided for 2 years. Not the evidence. The standing in front of it. He looked at the tablet. The empty audio player. His own hands flat on the table. Then he looked up. Tell me what I need to do. The filing had to be airtight. That was Delara's word. Because anything less gave the other side a gap, and a gap was all they needed to flip the story. From accountability to a personal attack on city leadership, from evidence to a political move by the Zirith family. They worked through the night. Delara had a contact at an independent legal organization. Not a PAC firm. Not city-affiliated. A non-profit legal group that had been filing public interest cases for 12 years. Their director, Adiz Fontaine-Briggs, arrived at 11 at night with 2 associates and the look of someone who had been expecting this call for a long time. She listened to the recording once, beginning to end, without stopping it. When it finished, she took off her glasses, set them on the table and said, "We file in federal court. Not city. Not county. Federal. 2 of the disappeared individuals were involved in federally registered land disputes. That gives us jurisdiction that bypasses every compromised lever in this city's system. That mattered. Federal jurisdiction meant Seve's connections inside City Hall couldn't touch the filing. It meant PAC elders couldn't pressure a local judge. It meant the case existed in a space that Halverson's internal networks couldn't quietly collapse. They built it through the night. Thyron gave a written statement. 3 pages. He described the meeting in detail. The room, the attendees he could identify, the audio device, and his immediate actions after the meeting ended. Delara's associate cross-referenced his statement against the audio timestamps and found 17 points of direct corroboration. Not approximate. Exact. At 3 in the morning, Cashin brought food. He set it on the side table and went back to his chair without comment. Nobody said anything about it. Everyone ate. Before Evander got the records, he had not slept. He had worked his contact at the city records office all night, and what came through at 4 in the morning was a partial file, pulled from a secondary backup system that the original deletion sweep had not reached. Thyron's employment record, his assignment to the Commerce Building, his listed role as record keeper for closed meetings in the 3rd quarter of that year, including the Marin District meeting, his name, in an official city document. Thyron looked at it on the screen for a long time. 2 years of not existing on paper. 2 years erased from a city his mother had served for 20 years. And here, in a backup file on a government server, was proof that he had been real. That he had been there. That what he saw had happened. Adiz added it to the filing as Exhibit C. By 6 in the morning, they had a federal complaint, 3 exhibits, 2 supporting affidavits, and a chain of custody document for the audio recording signed by Thyron, Delara, and 2 witnesses. Adiz sent it at 6:14. Electronic filing to the Federal District Court Clerk. Simultaneous copy to the Office of the Federal Attorney General. And copies to 2 investigative journalists Delara had pre-selected. People who understood the difference between publishing immediately and publishing at the right moment. The first response came at 7:42. Not from the court. From the city. Harlan Seve's office issued a statement withdrawing his name from consideration for the director position. The statement cited personal reasons and an ongoing health matter. The room went quiet when Evander read it aloud. "He knew before we filed," Delara said. Whitfield warned him. "The question is whether he runs or fights." "He can't fight if the federal filing is already in," Adiz said. "He doesn't need a clean avenue," Delara said. "He needs a delay. Delays become confusion. Confusion becomes doubt. Doubt becomes a story that ends with nobody being sure what actually happened." She looked at Thyron. "Which is why the next step is yours." He knew what she meant. The filing was done. The legal mechanism was in motion. But a federal case could take months. And in that time, the story could be shaped by whoever talked loudest and earliest. "You need to speak publicly," Delara said. "Not through a journalist. Not through a statement. You, in front of a camera, saying what you saw when you saw it and what was done to you afterward. Personal testimony. Not legal language. I've been invisible for 2 years. I know. The moment I put my face on this. The moment you put your face on this," she said, "you stop being someone they can erase. They already tried once. They can't do it twice if the whole city has seen you." Thyron looked at Valric. Valric said nothing. That was the answer. This was not a Zereth decision. Not a legal one. It was his. He stood. He walked to the window. Below, Halverson was waking up. Morning light on the buildings. Coffee shops opening. People with no idea what had been built overnight in a room 3 floors above them. He thought about his mother. He thought about the train station bench. He thought about 60 cents and cold noodles and a coat that smelled like someone else's life. Then he turned around. "Set up the camera," he said. The video went up at noon. No news organization. No broadcast arrangement. A direct upload to a public account Adiz's organization held in reserve, with a plain thumbnail Thyron's face. Straight on, no filter, no production, and a title that said only what I witnessed. Halverson. 3 years ago. 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Thyron spoke the entire time without notes. He described the meeting, the room, the voices, the argument, and what happened to his life in the weeks that followed. He described his mother. He described the train station. He described 2 years of living in a city that had deleted him and what that felt like from the inside. He did not use legal language. He did not hedge. He spoke the way a person speaks when they have been quiet for too long and the words have built up pressure that can only go one direction. Within 2 hours, 400,000 views. By hour 4, over 1 million. Halverson's private pack networks, the ones that had shared the train station footage, framed Thyron as a nobody, whispered about Zereth politics, went quiet. Not deleted. Quiet. The way a room goes quiet when the thing being whispered about walks through the door. The federal court acknowledged receipt of the complaint. 3 city council members issued statements by mid-afternoon. 2 called for an independent investigation. The third, Aldous Pritchard, tangentially connected to the Marin Development Corridor, resigned his seat before 5 o'clock. Elder Whitfield checked into a private medical facility at 2 in the afternoon, citing chest pains. His attorney released a brief statement confirming he would cooperate fully with any investigation. Harlan Seve said nothing at all. That silence was not neutral. It was a man calculating, in real time, whether to fight or fold. Thyron watched the numbers climb on a laptop in the Cartwright office. He had not slept. None of them had. There was food on the table that nobody was eating. The room had the specific energy of people who had been working towards something for a long time and were now standing on the far side of it, not entirely sure what standing there felt like. Delara sat next to him. It's not over, she said. I know. The federal case will take time. Legal challenges. Someone will claim chain of custody issues with the tablet. People will try to make you look unreliable. Your past, the streets, your mental state, all of it becomes a target. I know. You're living in public now. No more invisible. Good, he said. She looked at him. I don't have the energy to disappear again, he said simply. Across the room, Valric was on a call. The Zirith name was fully attached to this now, and that brought its own weight. Pack allies, business contacts, people who needed to know which side of history they were standing on. Cashin was back at the Zirith building managing what was happening there. Evander was with the legal team, and Thyron sat in a chair in a third-floor office on Cartwright Street, watching a counter tell him how many people had now seen his face. 2.3 million. Valric finished his call. He walked over and sat across from Thyron. For a moment they looked at each other. The way two people look when they've been through something fast and difficult together and haven't processed it yet. My father would have done this, Valric said. Quiet. Not for the room, just for Thyron. He was building towards something like this when they stopped him. I think some part of me came back to Halverson to finish what he started. I was just a record keeper, Thyron said. You were the only person who stayed honest about what they saw. A pause. In a city full of people who had every reason to stay quiet, you held onto a tablet in a gray case for 3 years. He held Thyron's gaze. That's not nothing. 2.4 million. What happens to you now? Thyron asked. The Zirith name is in this. Some of those pack connections won't survive. Some of them shouldn't have survived this long. Valric stood. I'll manage what's mine. You manage what's yours. He extended his hand. Thyron looked at it for a second. Then he shook it. Outside, Halverson kept moving. The city that had erased a man, deleted his records, scattered his life, and left him on a bench with cold noodles. That city was now saying his name. 2.5 million times and climbing. The federal case would be long. The fights were not over. Harlan Seve had not spoken, and silence from a man like that never lasted. The real pressure was still ahead. But Thyron Kale had a name again, an address, a face that millions of people had seen. And the tablet, no, not in a drawer anymore. In the evidence file of a federal court. Out in the open, where it belonged. Where no one could quietly make it disappear. Some things once seen cannot be unseen. Some truths, once spoken, cannot be unspoken. And some people, the ones who were told they didn't exist, who were erased and discarded and left in the cold, sometimes those are exactly the people who end up changing everything. If this story moved something in you, if you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or silenced by a system that was supposed to protect you, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story like this, send it to them. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story on this channel. Because the next one is already coming, and it starts somewhere you won't expect.